I was once at the Capitol because I was a parent chaperone on a class trip. And a state senator saw me and said, please, please come into this meeting. I think it was about nursing home residents' rights. She said, we need your help. You can help us figure things out. And I responded, I can't. I'm a parent chaperone. See these kids? She said, bring them in. So we all went into the meeting, and those kids got to watch legislative advocacy, problem solving, and maybe most important, consensus building in action.
Welcome to the NCA's podcast, Conversations on Aging and Justice, your trusted source for the latest in news, research, and policy in elder justice. The NCEA is excited to introduce the OGs of Elder Justice series, where you'll hear trailblazers in the field share their passions, joys, collaborations, frustrations, and innovations, or any combination thereof, in elder justice through informal and candid conversations. In this episode of the OGs of Elder Justice, Hilary Dalin and Vicki Gottlich discuss their collaborative efforts in direct service and advocacy. They emphasize the importance of combining policy work with an understanding of individual experiences to effectively address the needs of older adults. Hilary Dalin has been the director of the Office of Elder Justice at the Administration on Aging within the Administration for Community Living, or ACL, where she now serves as Senior Advisor of Elder Justice and Elder Rights. Prior to joining the government, Hilary was involved nationally and at the state level with benefits access, elder abuse remedies, and legal assistance for older Americans. Vicki Gottlich is Deputy Administrator for Policy and Evaluation at ACL. Before joining the government, Ms. Gottlich worked as an attorney and beneficiary advocate for older people and people with disabilities, engaging in policy work, litigation, and administrative advocacy.
So, Hilary, when did you first become aware of me?
Well, I think we were at a National Senior Citizens Law Center conference, and I sort of knew who you were, but I watched you stand up and very calmly and assertively speak truth to power, talking to a very senior person within the department we happen to now work for, and just tell him things that he probably didn't want to hear, but that were absolutely necessary for him to hear. And I just knew that, not only did you know the law and were confident about the law, but you were also so sensitive to the older clients' lived experiences that I was seeing on a daily basis. I just thought, I got to get to know this woman better. So what about you, Vicki? When did you first become aware of me?
I think I always knew who you were. There were not many of us who were representing the rights of older people at that time. And we wanted to be aware of who the key advocates were, make sure that our work was coordinating. And it was fun to discover that we were all tackling very similar issues. And that actually brings me to one of the early things that we did together. We were part of the small group that cared about older adults' rights. We started from a rights-based premise that entitlements like Medicare and Medicaid are not charity to beg for, and that led us into advocating for notice and appeal rights. And what was fun is we started in the Medicare context. The work that we did on behalf of individual clients, class action litigation, and administrative advocacy then turned into appeals protections that got incorporated into the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. Also found their ways into the Affordable Care Act.
So we came at this from different places because you quickly moved into the policy realm at a higher level of affecting millions of people through policy work. And I stayed at the individual level of representing individual older people for many, 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 decades, actually. And, we both saw from our different perspectives that it's not always easy to sync up the policy work with understanding the actual needs of each individual older adult's lived experience to some degree, it takes a different skill set and a lot of creativity. And I have to say, a lot of optimism to kind of sync up the policy work with the sort of work at the individual level. And I think we both really grappled with that a lot, and we grew together to understand how to kind of merge what we were doing into a holistic, trauma-informed, culturally sensitive approach to the work at both levels so that the individual experiences bubble up into policy and the policy can be reflective of those needs at the ground level. That synchronization, I think, in some way has informed everything that we've done together and each of us individually through the years. And I know, Vicki, that it's grown our friendship, right?
Right. We started as legal services attorneys, and we moved in different directions. But the work we did seemed natural to get us into other issues that defined aging for so many. So guardianship, opposition to guardianship, and court reform. For, very long periods of time, we both were involved in defending people over whom guardianship was. We fought against taking away the basic rights to make decision about one's own life, both in court, national arena, among all the efforts to do guardianship reform and to promote alternatives to guardianship that were less restrictive, such as powers of attorney and advance directives.
And you kind of see this evolving even very recently, right, Vicki, into the Older Americans Act regulations, which we were so excited, both of us, to be working on, in that space. And I will say that for me, and I think also for you, it was kind of a natural correlative to go from that guardianship work to looking at how we as legal advocates could work with older adults who were experiencing abuse, neglect, and exploitation, which led us to think about how could we as legal advocates work with adult protective services and partner to keep our clients safe, but in a rights-based framework around doing that. So in other words, to be person-directed and supportive of the agency of the elders with whom we were sharing the work with adult protective services and other partners who are in this space as well. This is a real challenge. And, honestly, and it's something that I know both of us have had conversations about with our partners in these fields. Sometimes we're on the same side. Sometimes we're on opposite sides of a particular case, like in guardianship matters. But the thing that I think was most important that we brought into the work, all of us, was the understanding that even when we didn't agree with each other about something, we could always be collegial, respectful, and fully committed, all of us, to common client-first goals. So those partnerships have just been so important, I really think, for both of us, with adult protective services, with the long-term care ombudsman program, with clinicians, with researchers. It's just been really important. And then that led to some other things, Vicki, right, that we were talking about, like care at home, rights to care at home, and rights of nursing home residents, right, Vicki?
Yes, it did. And we used the variety of legal tools that we have, like litigation, policy advocacy, administrative advocacy, legislative advocacy, to support rights to live in a place of the individual's choosing. And as we move towards promoting care and living in the community, a great example is the case of Hilary against Shalala, which was a class action litigation establishing critical rights for people who could not get the Medicare home health care that they needed. And Mrs. Healy was your client, right?
Yes, I had the great pleasure of working with Mrs. Healy And that's the way she wanted to be known. So no, we are not mispronouncing that honorific in front of her name. She was Mrs. Healy, and she had lost her Medicare home care and didn't know why, and came to get some help. And it quickly became clear that she wasn't alone in this. So when I explained that to her, she said, and I'll never forget this, I want my name to mean something. She wanted to be the named plaintiff. She wanted to play an important role in helping not only herself, but others who were similarly situated. So I brought her to the litigation team, which included you in the lead, and you took over as one of the lead counsel in that case.
And that case is a good example of how an individual client led to a class action. But the litigation was not enough, because after the settlement of that case, we had to work with the administrative agency to help develop the notices that would inform people of their rights and help to develop the administrative appeals process so that they could continue to get home health services pending an appeal before the services were terminated, and it could enable them to continue to stay at home. What's interesting about that case as well is it was an example of how some of the education that we did with providers helped them understand that people were eligible for Medicare benefits when they thought perhaps that they weren't. So it's a real good juxtaposition of policy and the way policy impacts lives of real people as we age, like us.
Yes. So it really all comes first to full circle. And what a privilege it's been for us to, have had all of these experiences along the full gamut of advocacy. And you've talked about some of that, Vicki. I want to just throw a few more of those, into the discussion. There's the individual representation that I did for so long, but you also, everything you've done was also premised in those experiences of getting to know so many older people, hearing their stories, and playing a small part in improving their lives through rights-based advocacy that put them not only in the center, but them in the director's seat of their own lives. The class action litigation that we've talked about. And then there's the administrative advocacy, from the outside, presenting lived experiences to policymakers like we are now. And then from the inside, what we've done for the last many years of developing policies and programs that are informed and sensitive to meet the needs of older adults, like, for example, in the Older Americans Act regulation, clarifying the meaning throughout that regulation, the incredible meaning and power of the Older Americans Act, doing grant making that can affect change, like the grant making we're doing with highest state courts to really get at reform of guardianship, supporting promising programs in the field, improving legal assistance, and so much more. Well, there's the advocacy that we did in the legislative branch, both at the state level and also, of course, with the federal government. And I remember a long time ago, long before I knew I'd end up in D.C., when I was an advocate at the state level for elder rights. I was once at the Capitol because I was a parent chaperone on a class trip. And a state senator saw me and said, please, please come into this meeting. I think it was about nursing home residents' rights. She said, we need your help. You can help us figure things out. And I responded, I can't. I'm a parent chaperone. See these kids? She said, bring them in. So we all went into the meeting, and those kids got to watch legislative advocacy, problem solving, and maybe most important, consensus building in action.
Federal level, going into Capitol Hill and saying, this is what the law says, but in reality, the law is not working to protect real people. And when Medicare Part D was first being implemented, a number of us noticed that the way the low-income subsidy was being calculated, there were not a lot of standalone Part D plans that were eligible to be zero premium plans. So we came up with a legislative fix. And I went and talked to a congressional staffer who now has a high position in the administrative agency.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Yes, she worked for a congressman who has a political appointment in the same agency. And we explained the issue to her, and she got it, and she explained it to the congressman, and a fix was included in the next Medicare bill. And that, again, shows how things work from the individual client to the general to the policy to the legislative. It was really fun, and those were examples that we're really proud of.
Absolutely. And from the outside to the inside, putting policies into practice, partnering up with so many amazing elders and so many amazing partners who've just become really close friends and work colleagues, all to assert the rights and achieve justice for older people in this country. So, Vicki, what motivates you? What's motivated you to just stay with this and do this work throughout your whole career?
Well, as many of us in the field of elder advocacy say, it was clearly my grandmother and the respect I had for her and watched her as she aged that made me want to work on behalf of older people. The older clients that I had when I was a law student at Legal Aid, and then the clients that I had when I was an attorney in Legal Aid, you could see the difference that you were making in people's lives. Plus, the people with whom we work are all dedicated and motivated and more interested in protecting the rights of the individuals than making a lot of money, making a name for themselves. The most joy that people get was that they can see something that they do on behalf of their clients. What about you, Hilary?
So yes, also my grandma, slightly different story. My grandma was sort of forced into a nursing home. It's a very long story, but the way it was put to her and to me, and I was the only direct relative, and I was essentially still a kid, was there's no other option. She needs to be in a nursing home. With what I know now, she never would have gone into a nursing home. But that experience and watching her go very reluctantly, but then make a life for herself and create a community and a home for herself, even in that place, was inspiring. And then some of my early clients, my older clients, they were women, and they would say things to me like, wow, you got to stay in school. You got to become a lawyer. We learned how to read only because our brothers taught us what they were learning in school, because we didn't get to go to school from wherever they came from. We didn't get to go to school. You're so inspiring to us. And I would be like, oh no, you're the inspiring ones. You're inspiring to me. So just that kind of, that's been my inspiration. Plus, of course, everything that you said. So where does that leave us now? Well, it leaves us with this. 1, 2, 3, 4. We are proud to be among the OG who began the fight to guard elder rights.
We are elders now, and this rap told you how. We work together to make lives better. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the OGs of Elder Justice and the short rap session from Hilary and Vicki. Here's a fun fact. Beyond elder rights advocacy, Hilary and Vicki also share a passion for rapping together and created one for former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Aging, Edwin Walker's retirement. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify to stay updated with our latest content.